Okay, so that's exciting. If you're new to the channel, we're going to be taking a look at some of our favorite assets, and I think we're going to be taking a little bit more time just for pure conjecture and thesis around investing and trading. Now, we're going to be diving into the markets, but around this, what I want everyone to do is to remember to remain calm. I'm going to start today off by reminiscing with one of our favorite stock operators, Jesse Livermore, and go with the quote that he has to say. There's a time to be long, a time to be short, and a time to go fishing. So with that in mind, let's dive into the markets. Boom. Okay, so this is, everything's looking good here, right? On the daily right now, Bitcoin at this moment, on Friday at 6:03 p.m. in Costa Rica, on whatever day it is in the month of the year of 2020, November 6th, my calendar tells me, we have come to an intermediary position where Bitcoin is going to do one of two things for the finality of its SOS. We're going to get a peak out top, maybe upwards of $17,000 for this final kind of regression line, or we're going to stay here and kind of max. It really seems to me like we're going to have a kind of a freak move into 17,000. So when we left this trading range, we were looking for between 14 and 16, but seeing this top regression line up here, this one specifically at around 17,000, something just lets me feel that. Now, this is one of the difficult things about markets is we're not trying to predict it, we're trying to understand it as it moves. So we could see very clearly before we started this breakout that there is the last kind of finality of the VPVR went a little something like this, and you can see we're kind of stuck in some of its last stages now on the right hand side here. It's quite small, but if you look and you know what we're talking about, it's right over here. Now, this may not be helpful for the average investor and trader to know all these things, so right now I want to start by saying, if you're studying with us and you know, or if you haven't, what you want to know is where we are in the markets. And right now we are in the final stages of what's known as an accumulation pattern, ladies and gentlemen. And that means the beginning of a bull market. This asset has been wild to ride on and enjoyable to be a part of the community of this evolving technology. So when we saw this initial SOS come out in phase D, kind of signaling the start of phase E, we don't know where it's going to top out. But what's interesting and important to us now is the trading range that it forms. Probably somewhere between 13 and maybe even as low as 11,000, depending on what's happening. Now, given what we've seen, I would assume it's probably lower. Maybe it even turns into a rising gradient bottom. It does something like this before it makes another SOS and final LPS before going much higher potentially. These are going to be the key indications for anyone who knows how to use the tools that are at hand. So we're going to be making a few more videos about how to use leverage, margin trading, futures contracts, options, all the more advanced exotics that kind of exist in this trading and portfolio management skill set. And the applications of those things. But what we wanted to do is keep it very simple. So right now, all we're trying to do is understand two parts of the market cycle, the accumulation part and the distribution. Now, starting with the Jesse Livermore quote that we went over, the accumulation is the time to go long, and the distribution would be the time to go short. Now, being short in these markets right now is just absolutely silly because this is the time to go long. This entire bottom accumulation pattern here is actually a longer accumulation pattern. It's beautiful, really. So if we know we're in accumulation of over, what is this, from selling climax to where we are now, 720 days into this process now, what we need to remember is that this is just the beginning, and it's going to give us a few options to really stake a claim here and figure out what it is we want to do with our market position, because now we're going long and we're going to come to a climax over the next, maybe say year or two. I'm not sure, it could happen sooner, but the buying climax is where we would effectively want to be short or out of the market to some degree or another. But right now is not that time. Let me say that again. Right now is not the time to be out of the market. We're seeing a big capitulation and turnaround and potentially bottom. I saw stopping action in the rest of the DeFi sector and other areas today. Hugely positive news. So with the elections out of the way and things starting to stable out, well, what does this look like? You know, we've done this a few times before, and I want to repeat, and we're going to make today's episode a little longer, a little more educational, and we're going to take a Fibonacci extension and retracement tool. We're actually going to put it to the bottom of the box right now, the trading range here. Not all the way to the bottom of the selling climax, that's a different part, but the accumulation range that's been taking place. So our 1618 also comes out and extends to that 178, that $17,800 mark, right around here. So this is the secondary reason. So remember when we're using our regression lines and our VPVR, we're actually often going to see a lot of continents or continuance in the pattern at a multiple scale. So our 1618 also lies up there. It could act as a magnet to drag us all the way up there. Whether we go there or not is kind of what we'll start to look at next. Now again, the main exciting part here is that once it turns around, because it's going to, and it creates the bottom part of its trading range, that is going to be a massive indicator for us. So on the short term, let's try to use some of the things that we're learning now to see a great deal more of the information on the short term 4-hour chart as I open up. Now on the top, I've got a moving average, I've got an RSI at the bottom here, and one of the things that I want to always check kind of just first, just to get a market sentiment on the 4-hour, like again, more of like a pulse of what's going on, is we are actually have some very strong bearish divergence still on Bitcoin. So even though we've come up, we're quite flat and even decreasing and on a rising price scale. So that's where a bearish divergence would come from. Now, one of the things I think that we want to also look at here is the daily time frame, and just double check. We're actually not, we are now a little bit higher on the RSI. So the daily time frame is showing a little bit more volume on the RSI coming in effectively, or like strength on the RSI, because I think strength is a better word, because it is the relative strength index if you don't know what RSI stands for. But how much higher, it's not really to say. Again, there is reason to believe that we get a $17,000 punch. My initial assertion was 14 to 16,000, which we nailed perfectly. But this higher connotation is always difficult. And what we're looking for now, again, is the backup in the SOS and the new trading range to form. So from there, we see that Ethereum has actually gained a lot of strength in the positions that we were watching as well. So I started to go long again at 380, at 390 at the back up phase here. So again, let's kind of go over this. Two parts of the market cycle. We've got a, we'll go over the conjecture here entirely. I think it's extremely important. We'll do this for Link as well at the end, so stick around. We don't have all the data here, but let's just pretend we have an accumulation and then a distribution period. Very, very like picture perfect idea. Down here, that's not what we're looking at. We're actually looking at an accumulation period right here. So when we're looking at an accumulation period, we see the selling climax, this forms phase A. We see our secondary test, this forms phase B. Our spring, quite indicatively right near the pandemic, when everyone was at peak fear, was phase C. We saw a test, our LPS, and then our first SOS outside of the box, which is where Bitcoin comparatively is right now. That SOS comes up and it breaks into and past that 1618. Right, so there's a lot of momentum for Ethereum here. This is again reason why the conjecture for Bitcoin going to the 1618 is actually quite possible. So keep it in mind, I have that $17,780 mark for the top of the regression line on Bitcoin potentially as well. But more importantly, after we had the SOS, we formed this awkward kind of reaccumulation. Now it's not the prettiest, but what it starts to give us, when it gets better and better as we look at it, because again, that was $1,200 or 1,200 days of accumulation for Ethereum to get to this point in its SOS and backup phase. So we saw this beautiful trading range, this what's highlighted in pink here, and this beautiful SOS, and then a backup phase, and then a breakout. So this is pretty much exactly how we had drawn it the other day. We were looking for a breakout maybe of 470, maybe even 490, 540 before another LPS back down, and a final SOS, probably right alongside Bitcoin's larger momentum play as well. So there's a few opportunities here, right? The opportunity is to get in at these trading ranges and, potentially just hold on for the ride and then sell and go short, right? Very simplify, times to go long, times to go short, and then a time to go fishing. So we are neither in the fishing time nor the short time, we are in the accumulation period. So when we're doing that and we're using these more exotic tools, we want to be a bit more precise with why we enter the markets at particular places. So here we were entering into 380 around the 1618 of the entire trading range here, and it was also our break across the creek. So here was the jump across the creek, and then we closed above it, and then boom, we took off. Very, very nice kind of picture perfect textbook play from Ethereum. One of the things I like about playing more with Bitcoin and Ethereum now in the way we do some of our bigger trading, the way I do some of my bigger trading, is well, first off, the liquidity issues are not there because it's a huge market, which is great. But more importantly, they play a little bit more precisely and with less volatility. Although the volatility is also what we like, so we will take a look at Link and kind of finalize conjecture. Now again, we could see an extension up as high as 541. I'm not going to try to time that. I took my first LPS positions. I'll wait. I sold a few on the way up, but I'm gonna wait effectively for the LPS to come back in. And even if it comes back in here, I'm still quite a bit above my initial entries, and I will probably re-up that play as I become more and more confident about the depth and the return of each of these SOSs and LPSs that I get. So on Link's side, wow, I love this. So we had been going over this. Now let's start over by ignoring the gradient pattern. So I'm going to ignore it with you guys by not removing it all. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist. The new trading range we're drawing is actually in green. So here you can see how we would normally draw a trading range in the horizontal. Now this pink bottom is what we call the rising gradient bottom through a trading range. So here, this was actually our spring. This was the spring. This was the first SOS and LPS test. And this is the first LPS. So we have our SOS up here, LPS down here. And now it's likely going to SOS again, maybe up as high as $14 before a recheck of the trading range and then a big breakout. Now, I had mentioned yesterday I thought Link was near the end of its bull market. I do believe that is the case, but I still think it has another sweet fat wave coming in. Down here, if we look at Link versus Bitcoin, you can see kind of a more of a regressive story that I've been watching. Here we have the original accumulation period between 2018 and 2019, and then the start of the bull market with multiple SOSs and LPSs, just like we're seeing with everything else that we're playing with, and then the first start of the big parabolic moves. I do think Link is going to get another one here because of the accumulation range that it has again been forming right here, which to me makes me think that this is a wave 4 of a much bigger sequence of basically impulse waves is what we call them. Impulse waves, I believe they're named that for a reason. But nonetheless, this technology sector is growing. Link is a valuable player in this sector, and that impulse is probably fairly well due. So I'm not going to bet against it. In fact, I started betting on it right near the bottom of this trading range. For those of you in the private group, you would have got an email highlighting this part and then also reminding everyone to think about this part. I actually called for around 10.7 to 11.3. We got 9.5 and 10.5. So like $1 in between. It's like a 10% range there on the ball. It's pretty fucking good, I figure. Considering, again, stop losses are supposed to be there to save you. So in the next few episodes, we're going to make them longer. We're going to go over a few of the other things. Like we're going to go over Wi-Fi, band. We're going to go over Avalanche. We're going to take a look at some of the other DeFi players that I'm interested in. But more importantly right now, as these SOSs and LPSs can continue in Bitcoin, I'm going to be solidifying my long positions, and that takes a fair amount of focus as it is to make sure you get it like gem clear, because it makes a big difference when you can do it. You can do it like that. So anyways, we're going to leave it at this. A little bit of a longer, maybe a shorter episode. I'm not even sure how long it was today. We had Ethereum up at 458, Bitcoin up at 15,636, and Link at $12.40 right now. We will be taking a look at the rest of the other players, but right now I'm just focused on these trades, and then we're also bringing we're going to get more into content, podcasts, etc. It's just hard in the jungle during these rainy season times. As I am learning how we went from a pandemic to protests to a hurricane rain, So it's kind of, yeah, it keeps you focused and busy with other things. Anyways, thank you for joining us to deal with the Arcane Bear. I do hope I press record. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to go. We'll see you guys again in the next episode.